Welcome everyone to a meetup called Project Management Stories, the balanced union of Product Owner and Scrum Master. Let's start by introducing ourselves. So today, myself, Miska and Erkki will be sharing you some stories from our careers. So my name is Miska. I have two roles at Solita. So I'm a people lead for a team of 12 project and service managers and Scrum Masters. And I also do customer work. Depending on the case, my role changes. So it can be project manager, service manager, and sometimes Scrum Master. So those are the roles I normally do my customer work. And I have roughly 16, 17 years of experience from software and IT projects. I've been doing like a consultation business all my life. All right, Erkki.
And I'm Erkki Tapola. I'm working currently at Solita as a project manager in the advisory services. So we are a group of senior project managers that have a very consultative role at different customers. And I've been working as a project manager for about 10 years and as a product owner for about 80 years. And then some Scrum mastering and agile coaching.
All right, thank you, Erkki. Okay, so today we will share you 6 stories about some real-life cases where these are divided in 2 categories. So we will be telling you shared stories about one person having several roles, for example, a project manager and a Scrum Master, and what kind of things this implies and what kind of things you have to consider. And also we'll be sharing you stories about different people, so separate people in these roles, for example, a product owner and Scrum Master, and how there can be different styles and dynamics between these roles. And our goal is to share you some lessons learned, which we have learned during our maybe not lengthy, but we have some mileage behind us. So our hope is that each of you has at least maybe a few things in your tool belt so you can detect, avoid, or if needed, embrace similar situations which we share with you in our stories. And I think that's our goal for today. Okay, but hey, let me first introduce something about project management role in Solita projects, because this is important to set the context for our stories, even though these things are kind of similar between different organizations. But at Solita, most of our products or projects are using agile methods, and especially and more specifically Scrum. And when we are doing larger projects, our goal is to have a diverse team of people and also dedicated people in manager and leader roles. So let's say, if possible, we want to have a separate person in a project manager and in a Scrum Master role and also in product owner role. But depending on the size of the project or the customer needs, because we are doing our work most often for customer projects, this might not be always possible. So sometimes one person either wants or in a way is forced to have several hats, and our stories today will be sharing some experiences from those. And sometimes, of course, we want to also convince the clients that it's beneficial to have a full-time Scrum Master, and usually it's a matter of discussions and telling how agile projects should be handled, but it's a dialogue usually. And on the right side of the slide, you can see the different roles. We won't be going to the basics today, what each of these roles are, but most of our stories will be revolving around these product owner, scrum master, and project manager roles, and what kind of different angles these people have in the project management scope. Okay, let's start with case example 1. This is a story from myself. So this is about trying to find the balance between two roles. So in this story, one person, myself, was working as a project manager and scrum master. This case was a software development project for a customer. Customer will be remaining anonymous, so naturally in this case it's more hygienic that way. We were using Scrum methods in this project, and we had a development team which had one combined project manager, Scrum Master, 5 software developers, and 2 designers. This project started quite normally. Everything was, in a way, quite smooth, and things were progressing in a normal way. But after a few months had passed, we started having some difficulties on 2 different fronts. So we had some administrative challenges. Our contract model was not optimal for agile delivery. And also we had some people challenges. So we had challenges with team dynamics. And as I was doing both of these roles, so project manager and scrum master, I had to balance between the leading and managing things, and that's usually like the project management, like a scope, and also being in the servant leader mode, helping people, and also like guiding and coaching the product owner how agile should be applied. And that's more of the scrum master responsibility. And also we had some challenges that the project had a product owner who didn't have full support from the business. And this led to a so-called leadership void and also some kind of decision paralysis. And we were in a non-efficient state, so things weren't progressing smoothly. So what happened? Myself and the product owner noticed that, hey, we have challenges. Things aren't progressing. We have some problems, and we did some adjustments to our roles and responsibilities. So we got an agile coach. At Solita we have people who coach in a way. We do agile deliveries, and also the product owner got support from business and in a way was stronger as the product owner, and the project was in a way soon was progressing nicely. And in this case, I want to share you some lessons I learned from this case. And when you're doing 2 roles, for example, in this case, project manager and scrum master combination, you should be aware of your personal preferences, like tendencies, because people usually have their own comfort zone. And you should have a possibility and ability to constantly reflect and make conscious adjustments. And am I now doing Scrum Master things, or am I now doing project manager things? And it's in a way you shouldn't just go with the flow. You should be in a way conscious about those decisions. And if it's at all possible, it's beneficial to have a separate person as a project manager and a scrum master, or at least have an agile coach in the beginning of the project. And when you're balancing between these two roles, you should utilize your team and empower them. But if needed, step away from the servant leader mode, and you should be able to also make decisions and or help business and product owner in making those decisions. All right, that was briefly about the case example 1. Let's go to the next story.
Yes, this one is also about combining the PM and the Scrum Master role in a single person. And I joined as a PO, as a product owner in a project which had a team that had been working together, I think maybe a year or year and a half. They were making software on site with APIs, and there was a part-time Scrum Master who had also the role of the project manager, kind of from the for the delivery from this external company, but also reporting and participating in the politics of the company. And this Scrum Master ended up a bit pushing the team, and I will go into this a bit further. Next slide, please. The story is that it did take some time for the team to kind of find their own voices, because there was not so much space maybe to do that. And this actually repeats in many of the teams. When you give the team the possibility to talk more, there are some individuals that usually speak, and generally the more experienced ones, hopefully. And because of the Scrum Master was quite strong, they felt that they need to bring their opinion in a kind of a strong manner, which then again might a bit limit people's willingness to participate in that discussion. But what I learned there is that you should nourish the team so that they will pull the requirements from the PO, hopefully in time, and avoid pushing them. PO and the Scrum Master are both important in this way, that they, although they are not leaders officially, they end up having a certain kind of aura around them, and people tend to take seriously what you say when you work in these roles. So be careful about pushing and let the team pull, because then they know how much they are going to do. If the team doesn't pull, then the Scrum Master needs to do the pulling. But the PO also needs to understand that because it's kind of a pipeline until sprint planning, that you need to get the requirements, you need to formulate them, communicate them, and refine the stories before they are planned for the sprint. And also there were, especially in the beginning, some issues with gates, because when you are as a Scrum Master, if you bounce requirements back to the product owner because they're not ready, you have maybe a definition of ready, what is ready to be refined, but that's basically only a gate, and you want to avoid that because it takes you in the direction of a waterfall process. So the product owner and Scrum Master need to work together towards refining the requirements. And if the requirements are not ready, then they need to be processed together and not just by the PO.
All right, that's a good point, and also using the definition of ready to increase the quality of the work in a way is beneficial, but using those as gates can be really hindering for the flow of the work. All right. Hey, let's go to the next story. This is a story from my side, and this is actually something that is almost like a force majeure kind of a situation, but not exactly that way. So this is a case where we had an agile project delivery for an organization which then had we could call it a surprise agile transformation. So this is a case from my history several years ago. I was the Scrum Master and also the project manager for the supplier side for a development team, and we had a product owner and project manager from customer organization. And yet again, as usual, projects start normally, and we got things running yet again smoothly. We had, I believe, 2 or 3 iterations, but then we started to notice that, hey, the customer started having a transformation project, and in the beginning, it seemed quite small scale transformation, but as time went by, we noticed that it grew to a full scale agile transformation, and this was not only like a change in the way development work was done, it was also a full-blown organizational change. We tried to proceed, but really soon we noticed that it was impossible because we had certain restrictions and limitations. For example, we had a fixed price project. It really got to a point where we had to put things on hold. And how the story really progressed that even though Scrum Master is in a position, or it's one of his or her responsibilities, that the outside distractions, and you could say that agile transformation is one example of a possible outside distraction, but shielding the team and the project from these kind of things sometimes gets impossible. And we really started to consume the really tight budget with trying to understand how we should proceed. So there was new ways of working. We had review gates, kind of, right? There was things which really were handled in a different way they were before. And we, together with the customer, then noticed that, hey, we don't have any other choice than to put the project to a halt. And we took a breather, so to say, and we made some changes how we could continue working with this new environment where we are. We refined the budget and the schedule, and in a way, we are more comfortable of doing things in this new environment. And some lessons learned and recommendations what I learned from this project. So if you have a project which is, so to say, fragile, it has some limitations or constraints. For example, it could be that there's a tight budget which is also fixed, or in a way so-called target price, or the schedule is tight, or something which the constraints are there. It's good to be aware that either as a Scrum Master or project manager, that these kind of things might have an impact on your project. And usually when we plan these kind of projects with the customer, the budget and the work estimates are made with certain assumptions. For example, that the way of working is something that we know. We know how the project will continue, what kind of things we have in place. But if you introduce lots of additional gates, Erkki mentioned already these gates as a definition of run, definition of ready kind of a gate, but in this case we had a like steering group gate committees and like really something that is additional bureaucracy, like review steerings and whatever. These things need to be reevaluated. So if you notice as a Scrum Master or a combination role that you have several hats, and this kind of larger transformation is initiated, you should at least pause and ponder if you can isolate or protect the team and the project from this kind of change. But sometimes that's not possible. Then you should really pause the project and implement change process, and then continue. Then continue with the new ways of working which are formed around you. All right.
Yeah, this is actually something that I was also thinking about, the isolating the team from the rest of the organization in a way that if the rest of the organization has a very different process, not so agile, maybe you can have this what I call an agile bubble, where you can work in an agile way inside the bubble, and then there's an interface on the surface of the bubble towards the rest of the organization, and that interface is practically the project manager or the product owner, the Scrum Master, whichever way feels natural in that environment. So it doesn't matter necessarily so much what the rest of the organization is doing, but sometimes it can get tricky still.
Exactly. Yeah, in a best case scenario, the outside distractions don't impact your work, but sometimes it gets challenging. All right, let's go to the next case.
Yes, in this case, I was working as a product owner in a new team, actually multiple teams, and they had limited experience with Scrum and with agile methods. They developed software and APIs based on an existing application, and there was a balance between kind of copying directly this existing application or thinking about what is relevant in this field, that because they were not exactly in the same field, these applications, but in similar fields. So the Scrum Master decided that pure Scrum is best for the beginning, and he started implementing Scrum very strongly and very strictly, and the team was simultaneously learning about agile ways of working. And also the Scrum Master was very brave to suggest different kinds of working methods that are in use in Agile, such as group coding and testing. Next slide, please. So the teams were able to establish their way of working with the Agile methods, and it took just a few months, but what doesn't happen yet in a few months is to grasp the spirit, what I call the spirit of Agile, to understand the psychology behind the methods, and to understand why certain things are recommended to be done in a specific way. So I think it was basically a good choice to be very strict about Scrum and not let people skip some parts that feel painful because of the change that is needed. But what we learned, and actually I was thinking about the previous learnings, some of the things I have learned are through positive examples. It may not be reflected very strongly here in the material, but it's not all this kind of painful learning that avoid doing something. It's actually, there have been many positive examples in my working life that I have adopted ideas from. But one of the problems that we faced was that the architecture was forming sprint by sprint, not pre-planned. And when you know actually, when you have a system that you are partially copying, I think that you should make sure that the team understands the bigger picture, that they can learn the overall structure and ideas in the existing application. The Scrum Guide implies, or I think it was saying at some point, somebody was saying directly that let the architecture form. I think it's not always so. And I would recommend that you start with pure Scrum, because the team needs to do all of those things mentioned in Scrum Guide. It's been developed about, I think, 28 years or 29 years, and there's a lot of collected wisdom there. So it has a point. Everything has a point. So I recommend trying it purely. And in so many organizations, due to the organization or individuals or managers, parts of Scrum are skipped, and that's dangerous. You can't say after that yes, we have tried Scrum, but it didn't work. You need to try Scrum really, and then say if it works or not. And generally it does. And what was surprising, we learned that pair and group coding and testing was a very good idea, and it improved efficiency, it improved the quality of results, but it was also intensive for the individuals. It was very tiring to work a full day with the whole group, but they were able to establish about 8 story points in a day, or 22 story points in a sprint. So, and the sprint was 2 weeks, so it was multiple times more efficient. But you can't do that every day anyway, so you need to choose. And story points in general were a very good way to estimate work, because it's relative effort estimation. It's easier for the group to agree and discuss how much work something is. You don't need to consider the individual efficiency. People have also all sorts of biases about the calendar time used or needed. But with story points, you get everything baked in, all the coffee breaks, all the problems with communicating with other companies about integrations, and all of this is statistically baked in over time into the story points. So I can recommend that really.
Yeah. And maybe one comment about starting with pure Scrum. This is one thing which Scrum Masters face in their careers, that they might start in one project or with one team with pure Scrum, and then they, as time goes by, they might custom tailor it a bit. And then when they go to the next team as a Scrum Master, they might have this faulty understanding that what worked with my previous team will work exactly the same way with my next team. So in a way, you might actually, in a way, take some findings which might not be relevant for the next team. So in a way, I agree with starting with pure Scrum in a way is a quite safe bet.
Essentially, in this case, the case 4 and case 5, as a product owner, I was happy with the way that the kind of infrastructure of doing was working. So I had space and time to do my job, and yeah, it was a very functional relationship between myself and the Scrum Master. And also in the case 5, there was a mature Scrum team developing software. There was myself as a product owner and the Scrum Master, both were full-time. And this Scrum Master was more of a facilitator, like it's explained in the Scrum Guide. He was not pushing the team. He was open to suggestions, and it was easier for him because he was not a project manager on the side. So it was very much about the team's willingness to develop their process, and they had a facilitator very present and clearing obstacles and so on. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So the same issue, same challenge we had with this team is that the experienced members speak out loud, and they were more experienced, so it's okay to bring their experience to the team. But always when you hear someone really experienced speaking, you may hesitate contradicting them or saying your own opinion. So this is something that you need to facilitate as a Scrum Master and as a product owner, depending on the situation. What we learned during this project is that the refining needs to be really optimized, because if you refine too early, then when the implementation starts, the team really doesn't remember the details. So you may end up refining same things multiple times. This is what we did. We just had to get back to the refinement. And if you know a few sprints ahead, and this is contradicting the Scrum Guide, I liked very much, and I like to plan a bit ahead, a few sprints, talking with the team, showing that, okay, here's an idea, but form your own. Like, this is a suggestion what we could be doing. And this is not pushing. You have to make sure that the team understands that it's just your way of formulating the plan in your head. And then with the team, you actually talk what is feasible to do next, what is most valuable to do next, and form a shared understanding. In refinements, you need to make enough notes, because generally people think that, okay, yeah, this is simple, I can remember this, and then they don't. So write enough, maybe record refining. Since you're remote now, you can record and play them back later. And go into the implementation details and steps, and actually think kind of like a preliminary tasking of sorts, because that gives you an understanding of the dependencies. So you can go pretty far in refinement, and then the planning is just, basically selecting which stories you will implement during the sprint. Yeah, I already mentioned about these strong individuals. You just need to make sure everybody feels comfortable opening their mouth, especially in refinement, planning, well, in every event. There are individuals that are more shy and may consider very intensive discussions aggressive. So you need to make sure that everybody understands that we are talking about issues and not people.
Yeah, and also as a Scrum Master, if you have these more silent team members in your team, it makes sense to give room for those people as well. So especially in these times when we used Teams and Zoom and whatever, really get them a chance to voice their opinions. So it's not only the more noisy, or let's say people who have more opinions, that they get the stage only. All right. Then our final story.
Yes, there's another case where it's the roles are more overlapping, and there was a team with quite experienced members, and the system was complex. There was existing infrastructure to be considered, and for project managers, actually at least 4 project managers working together, and the product owner and Scrum Master roles and the project manager roles were all kind of overlapping in some of these individuals. And yeah, next slide, please. The situation was still pretty manageable because, well, you may have read the recent Scrum Guide, and there the roles and responsibilities of a product owner and Scrum Master are within the Scrum team, and it doesn't require that there are people with these titles. These responsibilities can be kind of distributed within the team. So basically the roles can be combined in any way that seems feasible. But let's think about a pushy product owner who requires more and more from the team, and more speed and more deliverables. The Scrum Master would be defending against this and allowing the people, the team, to pull a realistic amount of work. And if you are in both of these roles, then this is a contradiction that you should have in you, because you have both of the roles. So you need to be objective about that. And the primary thing is defending the team. So essentially you would be primarily the Scrum Master. And one other thing that is against having a product owner and Scrum Master in the same person is that product owner work takes a lot of time. So if you have about 5 members in the team and you manage the requirements, that you don't have other people writing the requirements and eliciting requirements, then you have a lot of work just writing the requirements down, formulating them, drawing charts, and explaining these requirements to the team and answering team's questions. So you might not have a lot of time to be the Scrum Master, and then maybe you should have a Scrum Master from the team or someone doing that role specifically. And then if you do have a product owner from the customer side who is responsible for prioritization and trying to push the team and so on, then you can be primarily the Scrum Master, but you can also help the product owner to manage the requirements. And I think that's a very balanced union, because then the Scrum Master is always present, should be always present to shield the team and to make sure that obstacles are resolved and help the team do their work. So I think it's ideal that the Scrum Master also understands as much as possible about the requirements. And this is the type of arrangement that I have done and I feel is successful. But when you have the full PO responsibility and Scrum Master responsibility, then it can be quite a difficult situation unless you have a very small team, like a couple people or so. But generally, I think that these are some of the reasons why I would not recommend combining those roles with a larger team.
Yeah, and I also agree, because as Erkki mentioned, this balanced union, if you are doing those roles by yourself in a one single person, and you actually might become the bottleneck for the team, and you actually might become a reactive Scrum Master. And if you are not proactive, or rather are reactive Scrum Master, do you really have challenges on making the team work in an efficient and smooth way? So it might be possible with small team, but I also agree, but with larger teams, it's challenging. All right. Hey, we like to do these things in a way that we first tell you something and then we recap those and also give you some possibly some additional tips. So now we'll give you some conclusions and then we'll get to the questions and answers part. But hey, first some conclusions from myself. So maybe as a summary, so if you're doing these multiple roles by yourself, for example, I think also that this combining, actually there should be, I have a typo there, but it's trickier to combining the product owner and scrum master than it's to combining the project manager and scrum master. So, but it's good to remember that it's not always easy, and it usually gets easier with experience. So if you're taking on your first project, I would recommend that you try to concentrate on one task, maybe not one task, but one responsibility. It could be Scrum Master, it could be Product Owner, it could be Project Manager, but really trying to balance multiple roles, especially all of those 3 roles, it can be challenging. Then when you're doing new things or things which seem challenging, utilize support networks. For example, at Solita, we have Agile coaches. They are a group of people who are really familiar and experienced with how Agile methods, not only Scrum, but like Kanban and scaled Agile and like whatever should be applied. Also use competence communities. At Solita, we have a deeply rooted culture of sharing. So if I have a problem, for example, with my role of combining things, I can trust that I'll get help. There's always someone who's more experienced with a thing which I need help with. And then one thing which you actually will get once you get experience, you get to know yourself better. So you should find your way of leading projects. And of course, this leading here is, it can be a servant leader mode. So it's not always like a managerial thing. But remember, when you find your way of leading projects, do not get too comfortable, because if you stick on using your own comfort zone all the time, you actually will stop learning and growing. So then step out of your comfort zone and do something differently, because that's the way to learn and grow. And those are my conclusions.
And I would recommend some things myself. The product owner, this is partially repetition of what I have said today. As a product owner, you should allocate 100% of your time. You're going to need it, really. Anything less will show in as you being a bottleneck, quality being low, teams guessing wrong about what they should be doing and how they should do it, and a lot of feedback, hopefully in the reviews, the memos, showing you that now it's not going in the right way. But if you have 100% of your time and you are using it, a lot of it with the team, then it's going to work. And the title of product owner is given, but ownership is actually not. This is what I tell all the people I have organized product owner courses for. You need to show that you are taking the ownership. Show the organization that you are the guy to go to talk about the value and priorities of stories. And then when you are refining with the team, you start to learn what sort of questions they're asking. And you should do your homework early, so that when you go to refinement, the more answers you have, the better. You end up having also extra answers that you're not going to use. But it's all about efficiency of the refinement and the whole process. And avoid pushing work to the team, because they need to know how to pull. They need to understand why they need to be active, and before the refinement especially. And when the team pulls a scope to the sprint, respect the sprint. Don't interrupt the sprint unless it's extremely necessary. And you need to also provide support for the Scrum Master. It's a learning process for everybody involved. Optimally, people want that. They want something that's challenging and they want to learn. And the most important relationship in Scrum and in the whole software process is the relationship between the product owner and the Scrum Master. Scrum Master needs to facilitate the work primarily and shield the team. Side projects and tasks they can take a lot of the efficiency out of the whole process and create these kind of extracurricular activities that are not so useful and not so valuable, except for some individuals outside of the team. So if you give the team space to grow, they will become self-organizing and they will fulfill the requirements set by the PO. Everything comes through the PO. If you are a project manager, I think that you should primarily be in the agile role. You should be the Scrum Master and kind of secondarily the project manager, because being a Scrum Master actually leads indirectly into results and into deliverables. But the project manager who's reporting doesn't really create anything that is used by a user or a customer. And you need to also support in exchange the product owner so that he or she is able to grow in their role. And I think that many product owners need this because they know more about the domain than the agile process. And if the Scrum Master helps with the requirements, collecting the requirements, formulating them, like I said, I think it's very, very well functioning form of collaboration with the product owner. That's my 10 cents. I hope it's useful and helpful for some of you.
Thank you, Erkki. And as with our project deliveries, we are right on time. So we have 10 minutes for questions. The Spirit of Agile. Oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah, how I see the Spirit of Agile is when the individuals realize that they really want to hear their team members' opinions. They want to ask other people and they want to formulate a kind of a solution that is contributed by everybody, and that they understand why to use story points, and they understand that they have a bias when they are thinking about effort estimation in calendar time or hours, and all that which comes with experience when you have been using Scrum or other type of agile method, that you realize why you are doing it the way you are doing. And many people also, if you don't like agile, then it's a different thing. You don't want the spirit, then just change into another process or method. But generally people seem to like it.
Yeah, and usually if you don't like the Spirit of Agile, you just haven't tried it in a proper way yet. But yeah, that might be, yeah. Okay, there was another question. What would be the optimal division of roles when the supplier is in a different country than the customer? That's actually an interesting question. And
yeah,
I think it might be a different answer if we go back in time for before like 2 years. So like, because now the that like the Earth has become smaller, and we are all sitting in Teams and Zoom and whatever. So I think time zones is one thing we have to consider, and also like that you have a chance to, at least on theory, to see people. But I think I don't know what's the optimal division of roles. So I think the country actually shouldn't make a big difference there. But I don't know. Do you, Erkki, have like any thoughts about division of roles if the supplier is in a different country than the customer?
I think that you have a point, because we're all remote now, so it doesn't matter so much where you are. But I think it's more about culture, because when you cross a country border, you have already a different way of working. So I think that generally some nationalities are not as good with agile like others. So I can see the problem, I can appreciate the problem, but I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, and I think it's of course about building the project team. So if there are cultural differences, it's of course matter of product owner, scrum master, and team to build in a way to diminish the cultural differences by getting everyone to, in a way, aiming for one goal.
And tips for backlog refinement. Yeah, so who should facilitate? We have tried both Scrum Master facilitating and Product Owner facilitating, and I think it's more about the experience as a facilitator. It can be a third person in none of these roles. It just matters that they are listening well enough, and they are kind of pulling ideas out of the team, and making sure that the discussion is rolling and it's going towards the implementation. So that would be my tips. If you're not progressing, if you're not making the proper notes, if you're not getting the team to solve the problem during refinement, then you need to really aim for that solution-oriented discussion.
Yeah. And also with some teams, the backlog refinement can work also in a way that there are certain developers who are, for example, in architect role, and they really make some preparations, and they actually do take part of the facilitating role. So it depends on the team dynamics, but it depends on the team and also the maturity of the team.
Yeah, and this is also about pull and pushing the team. Scrum Masters optimally, I think, are people who, and actually I think also product owners are people who are filling the gaps in the software process by being themselves in an adaptive role. And if the team is really passive, it can get tricky, because you can't just let sprint after sprint go in vain. So you need to start pushing. But I think that generally they should understand that you are expecting them to pull the requirements and pull work from the product owner. And if they can't do that, I don't know if you need to change some of the team members to have. Actually, what's generally good for growing a team is that you have some members in the team who have been working in an agile way, so that they can show example to others. That's the best way to do it. And they can be the verbal individuals.
Yeah. And also maybe one tip for this pull and push part, because sometimes teams can actually fall into this trap that they become reactive and they lack the courage. So they actually might, if you start in the part of pushing, it actually can be really difficult to get back to the pulling part. So that's something that I have had this experience that one PO tried to push, and it took months to get back from that mode. So it can be a tricky thing if you try it once.
Definitely, pushing can make the team very unresponsive and withdrawn.
Yeah.
We had also some questions in Lyti. Raisa was asking about the possibility of having the Scrum Master Product Owner collaboration dynamics in other areas of work, such as marketing and communications. I must say that I don't have experience with that, but generally in sales there have been some buzz about using Scrum, and there are some sites you can find from Google if you look for Scrum in sales or Scrum in marketing. There is wisdom about that. Unfortunately, I don't have any.
Yeah, me neither. So,
but I do believe that wherever you have people working together, Scrum is a good option. You can try it definitely. And then there's another question: how should resources be divided in terms of time and hourly cost, such that the team does not have slag? Like how to take better decision to prepare a team of juniors and seniors based on customer requirements, time and financial constraints. So if I understand this correctly, like what would be the most efficient team?
Yeah, I understood it that well as well.
Yeah, so I think that you do need juniors in this time and age, because you can't get all the seniors you need. So you need to grow the juniors, and you need to have enough seniors in the team. I don't know, well, at least one, but preferably maybe two, and then you can have a couple of juniors who are kind of guided by these seniors, and I think generally it's the question of hourly cost and slag is that you have a properly functioning agile process.
Yeah, I also feel that the diverse team with suitable blend of juniors, and we have a term meteors and then seniors. I think that's usually the most well-functioning setup. I have had really much troubles with team of too many seniors. So I recommend having meteors and juniors as well.
That's a good point. Yeah. How do the seniors best train the juniors on Scrum? I think that example is the best way. And giving architectural responsibility to juniors, kind of presenting their idea and then having the seniors review and comment those ideas in a way that is not aggressive or diminishing the skills of those juniors. So I think that you do need a senior who has more of the pedagogic capabilities to be able to actually teach and provide guidance, and not just to be negative with that junior. Positive attitude is best. What is the average size of your projects? Actually, I don't quite know. Do you have a number?
Yeah, I would say that I'm always thinking about projects from team point of view, because everything we do, it comes from people. So I would say that the average size of Solita project we are doing is something between 5 and 10 people. So let's say 7.5 persons. That's a good average. So it depends. We have a really small teams, 2 or 3 people, but we do have a 30 or 40. Maybe 30 is the quite large, but let's say 7.5 persons between 5 and 10. That's my average size. I don't know if the question was about budget or how many requirements there are or the schedule, but I was answering from team size point of view.
Good. Okay, then there's a last question for best practices to handle situations where a project have multiple product owners with different decision power instead of one product owner, right? I think this would be kind of an example would be a SAFe organization that is having different levels of product owners.
Yeah, and if it's not scaled agile, or for example SAFe or something, if you're having a, let's say, normal Scrum team with normal product owner, I would say there should be one who is really the product owner. And of course, that person can have support business people or whatever, but if there are too many, so to say, generals like acting as a product owner, I would say one of those is really the product owner and the rest of are just acting as product owners. But there are different setups, and someone might have experience from working efficiently with many product owners, but I have bad experiences from those kind of situations.